Good evening, everybody. It is 8:29 p.m., September 29th, 2017. I just want to make a quick progress report video for you guys. I'm going to try not to make this too long. We got a lot to talk about over the weekend. We just need a little more time for things to develop to really have a lot of new information to share. But really quick, I just want to go over what we're dealing with and what we're seeing here. This is what they're expecting to possibly be Nate. Again, they pretty much took away the 5-day forecast. It is showing up on one of the charts I've pulled up, but for the most part, they're basically the idea here is that if this storm doesn't form in the next 48 hours, we have some shear winds coming in that are basically projected to rip it apart if it doesn't form. So that's why they took the 5-day chart away. They don't think it could have a possibility of forming after 2 days. So basically, if it's not strong enough to survive, those shear winds will rip it apart. But regardless, guys, if you live in South Florida, I'm sure you already know about this, that you're going to get some heavy rain from this, regardless if it's a tropical depression or a tropical storm. It's a lot of activity going on here. And what we have to worry about after this is the fact that we're going to have a constant counterclockwise motion going on in the Gulf and in the Caribbean for the foreseeable future. And what that does is that basically gives us one of those ingredients we need for tropical depressions as a constant. So when developing these storms, you need thunderstorms that begin to group together, and then you need a cyclone wind to begin to spin them. And if we have that cyclone wind always here, at least for a couple weeks, all you need to add to that are these storms, which have been going off like crazy all over this part of Mexico. They're clearly constantly coming off of South America, the north coast of South America, and that's why this has been noticed as a possible storm also. You can clearly see the counterclockwise rotation going on here over the top of Dominican Republic and then swirling up through Puerto Rico. Unfortunately, Puerto Rico is going to get a lot of rainstorms from this again, whether it forms or not. But by the looks of this right here, this looks to be the more significant of these two areas now. We have this that could possibly be Nate. If it doesn't form in 2 days and get a name, chances are this will become Nate. Just based on the amount of moisture in the air, the amount of exploding storms we can see. Every one of those little puffs you see is its own thunderstorm, and some of them are bigger than these entire islands. So they may look small on a chart like this, but these are massive storms, guys. And I'm going to show you a couple that are actually coming off West Africa as well, which I think will be the next significant hurricane. I'm not guaranteeing it. I never do that. But just by what I'm seeing, I'm surprised it hasn't even been put to a percentage yet on the disturbances chart. So we may see that as early as tomorrow. I'm going to show you guys that in a second. But if you guys take a look, you can see that counterclockwise motion starting to happen. This is also in part due to Maria and Lee leaving. If you can see, this is still moisture being pulled down from Maria. You can barely see the tail end of Lee up here. Actually, there's Maria right there. And you can see there's Lee. Some of this moisture still being pulled down south and then integrating itself with this counterclockwise cyclone formation that we more than likely will see at least as a tropical storm, at least in my opinion. But just look at these storms in South America here. They're exploding, and then they're being pulled up by this cyclone, and then the percentage of it is only at 20% over the next 2 days. They don't even have a 5-day chart to it yet, and that's because if it doesn't form in the next 2 days, chances are it's going to form basically parallel to the Bahamas. And we can see that right here, actually. Here is what they think might be Nate. 40% in the next 48 hours or 40% over the next 5 days. I think they dropped the 5-day forecast again because of those shear winds they're expecting. So if it's not strong enough to stay alive over 48 hours, chances are it's going to be broken up. But again, we're going to get a lot of weather in South Florida from that, and chances are it might move into the southern parts of Georgia. So we just got to wait and see. But again, here is the main concern right now. 20% over 5 days. They don't see it forming over the next 2 days only because it's traveling to the west, and they think once it hits this warm water here, that's when it's going to form. And with that cyclone formation we're seeing, this is a strong one. This is a very big cyclone. It's covering the entire area of Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico. So we really need to keep an eye on that, guys. And it could form sooner than 5 days. Just because it's a 20% over 5 days, we've seen those charts change hourly. we saw the first one actually when they were talking about the possibility of Nate over here. It went from 10 to 20 to 40 to 50 basically in an 8-hour period. So we know these things can develop very quickly. It all depends on the rotation, and it depends on how much water vapor is inside these things. Here is our radar version, basically of the same chart, just a wider area. You can see those deep reds we're always talking about, guys. When you see those deep reds, you know these are severe, severe thunderstorms. Very big storms. Some are bigger than Puerto Rico itself. Some are the size of Dominican Republic. So just to get an idea of how big these things really are. And you can see, guys, we can see the rotation happening. And this is why they gave it a percentage on the disturbance map. When you see stuff like this and with a counterclockwise rotation, that's what forms these storms. So this is why they're so concerned about this area. That's why I'm concerned about this area. And also, once it gets above Puerto Rico, the next area it's going to go is west. And that is because of a few things. I have one of these charts pulled up. Here we go. This is basically a snapshot of the jet stream. And if you remember, guys, that deep U we were waiting for to pull out Maria and Lee obviously did make it to the East Coast, but it flattened out. And that was in part because of Pilar. Remember that storm Pilar that was here? Still hanging up the jet stream down here. So the jet stream flattened out. Instead of being a U with two vertical walls moving across the U.S., it's now flattened out to this big flat piece, the top area taking out Maria and Lee. And now what this does, guys, is this makes a wall here. So anything that's forming here, the disturbance here, and even the thing I'm talking about that's coming off West Africa that I think has the potential to be a significant, powerful hurricane based on data that I'm seeing, they have nowhere to go but to follow these wall lines. You have high pressure in the Bermuda Atlantic here in the Atlantic Ocean. That's going to keep anything that forms in these areas really far down south and only moving to the west until it makes some sort of contact over here or until other pressures influence it. So basically, as of now, until this changes, anything that forms here has one direction to go, and that is west until it gets to a weaker area of this pressure. And then, like all the other storms, guys, it's either an East Coast deal or it's going to be a Gulf deal. Now, the longer this wall stays here, the more potential we have of these storms staying in this area and possibly hitting Florida. And that's why I put that article up. I don't have it linked now, but I'll put the link down below again. So for those of you that haven't seen it yet, this is part of the reason why Florida is always at risk. We get those long drawn out jet stream lines that instead of being vertical and moving across and giving options for these storms to move north, they flatten out like this, and that really keeps them pinned down south and riding along these lines about Lesser Antilles and then Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, Cuba, and then Bahamas and Florida. That doesn't mean it's not possible that they can go up the coast. They very well can. It's happened before. But more times than not, guys, these storms are forced down south and they're kept into the Gulf, or they're forced right into Florida. And that's why Florida's at high alert this time of year. It's just the way it works. It's not anything that unusual. The amount of storms is unusual, but where these storms go after they form isn't that unusual. So just get an idea of what we're talking about here. High pressure pushes storms in the opposite direction. Low pressure is attracted to low pressure. That's why we get those things called the Fujiwara effect, where two storms, once they get to within about 900 miles of each other, they begin to dance around in a circle, and usually the stronger of the two survive. It's not one of those situations like the perfect storm where they come together and then double in size. I'm sure it is possible. There's actually a chart here that I can show you guys real quick. The Canadian model here. Again, Canadian model is not good with the paths of storms, but it's very good at predicting storms forming. So I want to show you something interesting here. And this has to do with that system I'm talking about that they haven't recognized yet that's coming off of the coast of Africa. And I'm going to move forward here. These were those spotty storms we had in the thumbnail of the other one. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 low pressure disturbances going on. So a lot of activity going on. It doesn't mean these will all become hurricanes by any means at all. It just means that the potential is there for it to happen. And I want to show you something. You see these two down here? Watch how they interact with each other as I move forward. There's a Fujiwara right there. We saw those two storms. Once they get within a certain distance of each other, they begin to spin around. And I move it forward. It becomes one one storm here, usually the bigger of the two, takes over, but then watch what happens again. Another one that just interacted with that low right there, move forward. Now it's even bigger. That's a significant hurricane right here, guys, that comes off the west side of Africa in the area where we're not supposed to get storms anymore. But there, you see it right there. And also we have the disturbance going on here. This is actually what was going to form in this area. This model is not even recognizing Nate. If you notice, I'll show you again. I'll back it up. And this is what they think will be Nate, or just a tropical depression just affecting the southern coast of Florida, the southern tip of Florida rather. And then we move forward, and then we see this developing here. This has the potential of being a very significant storm, guys. Very significant. Fujiwara right there. Move forward again. Another Fujiwara. And then by that time, guys, we have a third disturbance going right into Florida. So you can see the activity going on. This is a very active area. It's going to stay active for the next couple weeks. And this is the last frame we have. That right there is a significant hurricane. Probably a Category 3, maybe more. It depends on how long it stays in these warm water paths here. And we just don't know where it's going to go. Again, this model is not that good at projecting where the storms go. It's good at projecting when they are created or when they produce. What else do I have for you? Oh, we want to check out this chart. Here is our mimic chart, and this is why I'm very concerned about the storm coming off of Africa, which the other models are finally starting to notice. It's because of this roll forward we have with the counterclockwise motion. Very dense storms here under the Cape Verde Islands. And this looks to me like it's going to follow that western track and then become an issue right around this area. We're just going to have to watch and see. These are the spaghetti models for the possibility of Nate. It looks like a giant mess here, but the overall idea is that it's going to form down here, possibly skim the southern tip of Florida, go back out into the Atlantic, maybe reforming depending on the temperature of the water, and then coming back across North Florida and then into the Gulf. So again, we're going to have to keep an eye on this. But again, while that's all happening, we have that disturbance down here by Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic, and then once again, we have that system coming off of the west coast of Africa. Here is a little bit of a better idea. You can see this massive group of storms coming off of West Africa that I think is going to interact with these storms here. And then you saw in the mimic chart that I showed you, it's beginning to roll forward, and those are the first signs you can see of a counterclockwise movement. And that's why this is concerning to me, guys. This may be one of our significant hurricanes for October. Now, the name of it, I'm not sure. It depends on if this creates, or this turns into Nate, or if this disturbance here becomes Nate. We have Nate, Ophelia, and then Felipe would be the next three. And then one more thing I want to show you guys. This is pretty cool. Maybe not cool, but it's very interesting. This is a system that's coming off, basically coming down from Canada and then getting caught in our jet stream. If you notice, guys, this thing almost forms an eye wall while it's passing over one of the Great Lakes. And I'm wondering if that's because that part of the storm was over water, because you can see it almost form right there, and then it begins to die out. But I want to show you what this is said to do afterwards. I'm going to back this up here. And now check this out. This is the system right here that we were just looking at on that graph. And it looks to be going right over New York. There it is there. You can see it. And then watch what happens when it gets into the ocean. It becomes this strip of storms here. And almost forms a hurricane. Pretty interesting. So we have a system that comes down from Canada over New York and northeast Pennsylvania, it looks like, then over Jersey and Long Island. And then you move forward. And it almost wants to develop in the Atlantic there. Maybe becoming a non-issue, but then again, you never know what happens here with the high pressures. It looks like high pressure here, high pressure there, with that significant hurricane we were talking about coming off of West Africa, and then two more systems going on in the Gulf. So again, the areas where these storms are going is changing, but the consistency of them forming is staying pretty true, at least according to most of these charts. So that is pretty much what I wanted to show you tonight, guys. Again, we are watching the area of the Caribbean for possibly Nate. If that becomes Nate, then we will have Ophelia more than likely in this area, and then maybe Felipe coming off the west coast of Africa. It all depends on which ones become tropical storms first. All right, that's all I got for you for tonight, guys. I hope you have a great weekend. I will be busy all weekend giving you guys information, so when you're not busy, come check it out, and then if not, we will see you Monday. All right, guys, have a great night. Take care.